Welcome to the Bears Draft Profile Series. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the position of edge rusher. So much to get to. So, Sammy, let's go ahead and start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
It's Hester trying to work it back to the middle. Gets past the first wave, and here he goes. It's Hester inside the 30. Hester's going to take it all the way for a touchdown. And no flag, 92 yards.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
Thank you so much for joining us here in what is the grand finale of the Bears Draft Profile Series. That's right. If you've missed any of the previous episodes, you can go back and search through this YouTube channel to find some of those. And of course, like and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, of course, as we march towards the 2024 NFL Draft, where Caleb Williams is expected to be the number one overall selection. Well, now we're going to be looking at edge rusher and we've talked about the top three receivers. We've talked about a couple of the tackles. But to me, I feel like eventually, it's almost eventually, I just feel like it's inevitable, might be the better word for this, that the Bears are going to draft a edge rusher. So to talk about it from the Sick Podcast, Draft Vogel, it's draft consultant and analyst, John Draft Vogel. John, how you living today?
Great. Nashville's awesome. Hopefully Chicago is just as awesome.
Chicago, I want to let everybody know that we will be out there in Chicago draft night. So make sure that you're going to be joining us at the Game Room Chicago. Should be a ton of fun. And again, we'll be celebrating the selection of Caleb Williams. There will be probably at least one more selection. You never know with Ryan Poles. He could trade back multiple times, pick up multiple second-round picks, and at that point be like, okay, I'm glad we flew out. No. But at some point, there will be other picks. But it's good to see that, assuming the Bears stay at number 9, maybe move up for a pick. But edge rusher is an interesting position to be because, again, it's not as exciting. We're all kind of hoping that they're going to fill in around Caleb Williams. But, the team went out and they traded for Keenan Allen. They brought in DeAndre Swift. They might feel like they're good at offense. Like, okay, yeah, we've done everything we can to make sure that Caleb Williams is going to be successful. We believe in Tyler Scott as the number 3 wide receiver. A lot of those are possibilities, which means edge rusher, which they really didn't tackle in the free agency period so far. So again, they could do this. Who's your top edge rusher in this draft?
Yeah, my top edge rusher is Dallas Turner out of Alabama. I think he's more of a stand-up guy than he is a true defensive end. Now, I want to go back just a second before I continue on that and kind of hit on the wide receiver thing because they could go edge rusher first round, not be done at wide receiver because this is an insanely deep wide receiver class.
Yeah.
Even when you start working down to the 3rd, 4th round, there's a really good chance you're still going to have guys that could come in there and contribute. Malachi Corley, Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson. There's a bunch of guys that you could pick up very, bottom of the 2nd, beginning of the 3rd round, even toward the end of the 3rd round, maybe even into the 4th round. Just depends how the boards fall. But it's a very, very deep wide receiver class. And so if you don't get a top 3 guy, there's still a lot of really good options out there to pick from. But no, so Turner is interesting because he's more of that rush edge that we kind of talk about, a stand-up edge rusher as opposed to a true hand-in-the-dirt type defensive end. He's very long and lanky, seems much more effective with his plan and arsenal when he's working, from upright. I think it's interesting, too, because Will Anderson Jr. came out of the same defense last year and played the same role that Turner did this year and made the move successfully to defensive end, the hand in the dirt. So it's not to say that he couldn't, but it's to say that right now I think he'd be better stand-up. He's very athletic. He's got great speed. I mean, 4.46 40 at 250 pounds is blazing. That's up there with Nolan Smith I think at 235 last year, ran a 4.39. So if you take that relative weight, it's about the same, you know?
Yeah.
He's got really good balance as a pass rusher. His hand usage is really good. I liked him as a tackler and in space, which is a huge aspect of, being a stand-up outside linebacker.
Of
But
course.
when he gets after the quarterback, he's been productive, and he's got an arsenal to work with.
Yeah, I really love the idea too of pairing a guy with Montez Sweat Jr., who, when he arrived in Chicago last season, had an immediate impact. And the Bears are in such an interesting possibility here, because whatever they do is, you know what, they're adding to something that's already a strength. If they're adding wide receiver, well, you've already got DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. If you're adding to your defensive line, you've already got Montez Sweat. Does Dallas Turner come in and just, I mean, when he's playing against somebody or playing opposite of somebody like Montez Sweat, is that a guy who could get double-digit sacks in his rookie season?
Yeah. If you've got somebody like Sweat on the other side pushing them that way, absolutely. Turner, when we talk about having an arsenal, that's a huge aspect of being a pass rusher, understanding what your plan is when you're going in to attack a guy. When we started talking about offensive linemen, we talked about the vertical versus horizontal setters a little. I mentioned it at least. Horizontal versus vertical setters, inside versus outside punchers. There's a way to attack every single combination of that, right? And understanding how to do it, understanding where guys are susceptible, and building a plan going into, a rep. And I'll give you an example. At the Senior Bowl last year, this is not a Chicago Bear guy, but I talked with,
Right.
Tommy Atabarwe out of Northwestern, and he was sort of this 280-pound defensive end / defensive tackle that ended up going to the combine, ran a 4.49. But the 280, that was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. But when I talked to him, I was like, "Hey, so what's your plan when you're going into a rep? How are you going to attack a dude?" Well, he said, "Well, it's to win." I said, "That's great, but how are you going to do it?" He goes, "Any means necessary." That's awesome. Look, I love the attitude, but you have to have a concrete plan. That's the difference between a professional and a guy that's in college, rushing after the quarterback, knowing that, hey, if I bring this attack, I already have this counter move figured out in my head. I already know what I'm doing as soon as he reacts, because that counter move a lot of times is what gets you to win, or that second counter move. And Dallas has that figured out. You can see that on tape with the way that he attacks people.
Yeah, that's one of the things that you always want to have with players is, even myself, I mean, playing at the high school level of, like, when there's a guy, when you're blocking, and I played in a team that the receiver blocked, is like knowing, like, if a guy's going to do a swim, and this is from an offensive, like, if the guy's doing a swim move, like, hit him in the armpit. If he's turning his back to you for, the spin, like, get him in his lower back and move him back, and always like punching somebody in the chest. So always having that kind of idea of what you want to do to combat something. And this is why those interviews are important too. I know that, when you're a prospect like that, and if you're just given cliches, it's kind of like, all right, I get it. Like, you've watched, Friday Night Lights. I appreciate that. But in addition, anyways, that notwithstanding, in addition to Dallas Turner, who are some other names that Bears fans should keep an eye out for, in case, and it's not, and again, the Bears could certainly move down from number 9 to pick up some additional picks in the second round, because, as you said, if they're not going to be taking one of the big 3 wide receivers, they're probably going to take a wide receiver in the second round, which means move down. There's a number of good first round edge rushers who are a couple of guys to keep an eye out for.
The top 2 that everybody's been talking about, and the top 2 that graded out for me, would be Jared Verse out of Florida State, and Laitu Latu out of UCLA.
Yes.
Yeah, that guy. He can play. He's fun. Now, Latu's an interesting case because he's a transfer from Washington. He actually medically retired from football in 2021. Decided to come back in 22, attempted to go back to the Washington football team. They wouldn't let him play, couldn't get cleared. So he transfers to UCLA. He gets cleared and becomes one of the top edge rushers in the country. So Latu, he's a very technical pass rusher. He's a good athlete. But the better athlete out of the 2 would be Jared Verse. He was very productive in his 2 years at Florida State. Ironically, he's a transfer from Albany. And Albany, for deep draft dive people, has a lot of people that like they were a really good team in the FCS, and they got some people that are fun to watch as maybe late round free agent type picks. But he comes from Albany. Florida State found him studying for Syracuse because the year before he transferred, they played Syracuse in one of the first games of the season. And there's a play where Sean Tucker, the Syracuse running back,
right,
who, you know, he was a guy that could fly, ran for a touchdown, and a dude almost caught up to him from the defensive line, and they were like, "Who's this defensive lineman chasing down Sean Tucker?" It was Jared Verse. So that's how Verse kind of got up his opportunity to play at Florida State, and he was very productive in his 2 years there. He's a guy that reminds me a lot of Brian Arakpo, if you remember him back in 2009. Very similar play style, very similar skill set.
Ooh, I like that comp. Yeah, I would take that. But again, and that's somebody too that you feel like you can drop down for. Even with the UCLA guy, I feel like he's going to be somebody who ends up dropping significantly in the draft. When you think about was it Jalen Smith a number of years ago, Eddie Jackson, to keep it with the Bears, and then Miles Jack. These guys that we love as players, you're like, this guy is a good football player, but there's something medically where they're like, yeah, we can't take him. End up in the second round where you're like, there are draft nicks right now, like us, or like you mostly, because I'm not a draft guy, but
your fantasy
you
guys,
look at that. But like you look at that and you're like, this is a great player. But then the teams are like, well, it's a first round pick. And like, I want to go with more of a surer thing. And unless you have multiple first round picks or multiple second round picks or something like that. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch. And I still, and again, I've talked about this at great length, that it really does not concern me, but it really feels like with everybody so excited about possibly taking one of the big three wide receivers, we're going to end up, Matt Eberflus is going to get another guy. Like, let's just be realistic. I want to ground Bears fans into this. As fun as it's going to be to get Caleb Williams, don't be disappointed when we take Dallas Turner at number 9. Don't be, because it's going to be good. Like, just like, think about it last year. Like, when you think about the Houston Texans, that's exactly what they did, is they got their quarterback and then they got their edge guy. And if we follow that same sort of similar trajectory of, listen, we're getting our quarterback and then we're getting our edge rusher, I think that's a great way for the Bears to go. So I'm glad we're dropping it on this one, because if I had done this earlier, people would have been like, I'm not listening to another word of this. But no, I think it's probably the most logical way that this is going to be unfolding. So I'll
give you a point there, Adam. Please. I'll give you a point real quick just to wrap this thing up, because, you know, not only did the Texans go quarterback, then take their edge rusher last year.
I know you're going to say. I know what you're going to say, and I love it. Please
Jonathan Grenard was the guy that benefited from having Anderson there. Grenard was a guy that was not really productive going into a contract year, you know, didn't quite have it figured out. They add Will Anderson Jr. to the other side, and all of a sudden Grenard's getting, you know, $80 million to go to the Minnesota Vikings. So think about that for a second. Like, that's what you're trying to unlock with Montez Sweat, is to have somebody on the other side of him that just unlocks him, takes all that attention off of him.
And I love that, because he goes to the Minnesota Vikings where he's not going to be as good, and they're going to expect him to be Danielle Hunter, and he's not going to be. And it's going to be hilarious to watch that unfold. One of the things I thought you were going to say is that the Texans also drafted Tank Dell
in the third round.
Round. So the Bears could do that. Not that Brian Thomas Jr., but like Lad McConkey, who is not related to Phil McConkey, which is something that nobody cares about, because people couldn't even figure out that Jim Harbaugh played with Marvin Harrison. Nobody is, until that show dropped, nobody admit, we were the first ones. We broke that because nobody was talking about that before us. Maybe.
Now, people also didn't put together, you know, like oh, dang it. I'm sorry. I totally lost my train of thought. I had it and it was gone. My bad.
It's okay. That's why we have editing here.
Sammy's a maestro. Thank God.
But listen, as we wrap this up and we wrap up this series, I want to thank you for taking the time. I think it's obvious to anybody who's been watching it. We filmed this all in one day, and then we're not that good at coordinating outfits. But at the same time, I want to thank you for taking all the time on a Sunday afternoon back in March to come down here and talk about this and break down some of these prospects. It's been a lot of fun. It's been very educational. And once again, I want to implore everybody to make sure that you've liked and subscribed the Sick Podcast Draft Vogel for all your draft needs. John, this has been a real pleasure for me.
Thanks, Adam. It's been a lot of fun for me too, man. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks again for being here. And thanks to everybody who's been watching. Make sure you liked and subscribe to both of these podcasts. And we'll continue to see you later as we get closer to the NFL draft. And Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.